Well, all right, we'll continue. They will still be here. We're ahead of schedule. Usually we're right behind schedule. Well, now I'm going to introduce a woman. Her title is the Director of Operations, but that's just one of the things she does. You know, you've heard about the person that's responsible for keeping the trains running on time. This is Yvette. This is Yvette Lugo, who is going to speak to you about asset management and some of the things that she sees there. But she's also, if you have any of the questions about why doesn't this happen or why doesn't that happen in a timely manner, Yvette's the one to ask. Yvette?
What's that? I'm not taking off my coat, it's too cold. And Teresa, I want to raise too, okay? I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about some of the notices that are coming out and that headquarters is working on. And I will also talk a little bit about some notices that have been published. So headquarters is now working on two notices. They're working on a utility analysis notice and changing the methodology. Also on the vacancy claims. The vacancy claims notice should be out for comment soon, and you have 30 days to comment, so I suggest you look out for that notice. The 4350.1 handbook, which is the multifamily handbook, is finally being revised, and that should be out in September of this year. So it's a good thing because I think this handbook is really old, and we rely a lot on this handbook, so that'll be coming out soon. Social Security benefits, as you know, have gone electronic now, and that was effective March 1st. We also have the EID housing notice, which was published and issued. It's Housing Notice 2013-06, and it was published on March 8th of 2013. And that notice supersedes all notices that were published in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011. And you can find that notice on HUD-Books. Residual receipts. I know this is an issue. The notice was issued in this past year, and it's Housing Notice 2012-14. And what that notice is asking is that we should be using or offsetting housing assistance payments. And so back in December, we started contacting all the owners and agents of those Section 8 contracts, which are the new regulation contracts that had balances in their residual receipts accounts, to start offsetting payments. And we had about $27 million in residual receipt balances that we needed to offset. We've expended over $5 million. We have 91 properties that we've identified that had to use their residual receipts accounts to offset their Section 8 payments. And we have another 13 more properties coming up in June that we will be sending out letters to. Hurricane Sandy, as Teresa mentioned, you know, it's been a long process. I know that I hound people. Out of, I believe, 1,000 properties, we only had about 50 properties that had major damage. Right now, we are down to about 25. And I want to thank you all for being patient with me. I'd like to get this over and done with. I know that we have a couple of properties that will be completed by September. So if you hear me calling you and hounding you, please be patient. You know, I want all these properties up and running again and all our residents back in place. And as Teresa mentioned on sustaining our investments, right now we are identifying those properties that we consider troubled. And we will go on to our potentially troubled properties. So we are working right now on identifying those properties that are insured and market and insured subsidized. So once we know which properties are high risk, we will be contacting our owners and agents to come up with plans on how we can get them out of the trouble status and get them into a non-trouble status. So you know, you'll be hearing a lot, you know, from our project managers. You know, we really need to come up with some type of plan, especially if it's a troubled property, so we can get them out of trouble. And after we complete that task, we're going to go on to our non-insured properties. So, that's it. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
There was a recent notice on interest rate reductions to mortgage modifications, which is processed through asset management. Do you guys have any guidance on how this is going through your office?
We did get some preliminary guidance. It's not finalized yet, so it's not something that we can really share with you at the present time. But we will be working very closely with headquarters on those mortgage modifications to reduce the interest rate.
Yvette, I just received a letter from your office on behalf of one of my clients authorizing access to residual receipts for some arrears in lieu of doing it in a rent increase. And that was a very good thing. We were very appreciative. My question is, to what extent, as a matter of policy, is the office going to be flexible on use of residual receipts going forward?
I mean, we really can't be that flexible. I mean, we need to recover those residual receipts. You know, what we also are doing, not only are we using those funds for offsetting Section 8 payments, but we're going to also offset the social service coordinator program. So we really can't be too flexible on residuals. And that only applies to the new regulation Section 8 contract, not the old reg.
We can only look at them on a case-by-case basis, and it's very limited. I mean, we've gotten our marching orders from headquarters, and we need every penny we can get. One of the other things I wanted just to point out, I know that Greg had sent out an announcement on training in May that's going to take place on financial management. I would suggest that you take a look at that, and if you can attend it, that would be terrific. It should be helpful. And by the way, this is my enforcer. Yes.
A couple of questions, please. First, regarding the service coordinator program. There's been a fair amount of concern about how the sequester is going to be affecting grant funding going forward. And since my project is coming up to its grant renewal, if you could tell us what you've been hearing and what you know, that would be, at least we'll know what we're up against.
We really haven't been hearing much about that. I mean, I don't think there should be an issue on the on that grant.
Okay, that's great, because my project was one of those severely damaged by Hurricane
Yes.
Sandy, and it was a case where our service coordinator, I would go so far as to say she probably was the one person that helped keep all the people, you know, functioning and keep the residents, you know, absolutely, you know, be able to, you know, just help us through
Right.
that whole incident. Regarding Hurricane Sandy, now that the recovery repair plan has been submitted, what's the follow-up with that as far as ongoing repairs? How often is Charlie Hawkinsmith going to be coming down to visit? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit about what the process is going forward?
Once you've completed your plan, you're going to submit your certification of completion. And then at that time, our inspector will go out just to verify that everything was completed.
So will there be any interim certifications?
No.
Okay, so basically only at the end of the process?
Only at the end. Right.
I was a little bit late. I know I'm asking a third question, sorry. So I missed much of what Teresa had said earlier, but luckily we had flood insurance that paying about 90% of the damage caused. But in looking ahead toward flood-proofing or making the property more resistant in preparation for future events. Obviously, the insurance company is not wanting any part of that, and you know, we've got our capital funds all tied up toward local 11 work. So with the federal funding that's been coming through the pipeline, what would be the process? I think you said the community development block grants would be the avenue for that. Do you know when a NOFA is going to be coming out, or, you know, application process? Because I'm going to be first online.
Unfortunately, I don't know at this point in time. I know that there is a plan of action both in New York City and New York State, which has not yet been approved, but that would be the vehicle for you, you know, to apply. It wouldn't come directly through HUD, it would go through the municipality. Yes, Steve?
Under Section 8, residual receipts used to fund Section 8 contract, there are some HUD programs that guarantee an annual return. And if you do not make your numbers and have an annual return, both the program and the project revenue use agreements provide for accessing residual receipts. The HUD committee make the distribution. Does the HUD notice now trump that regulatory agreement, that program requirement?
On the new HAP contracts, yes. Right.
The new contract, we're talking about new reg versus old
New
reg.
reg, new reg, right.
Greg, can you give some information on the?
Yes. What's happening is that NYSERDA, which is the New York State, Energy Reduction, Development Authority, well, they're coming out with a program called Resiliency. All right, it hasn't been out yet. They're doing surveys, and what that is going to do, you'll be able to go and get grant money from NYSERDA to move your equipment instead of being in the basement, being in, on the upper floor or on the roof or wherever that may be, and for other items that will, diminish any problems if you were to get flooded in the future. So keep your eye on the NYSERDA.
Greg, actually to that point, I got a call from NYSERDA last week, almost like a survey, but they said
Yes.
they were running through that whole program,
Right.
thinking it would be useful.
Yes, so that right now they're doing the survey, how much interest there is, okay? Once they find out how much interest there is, they're probably going to come out with a program to address those issues. All right, just wanted to, get everybody up to date.
Thank you.
The other thing I just wanted to put out there is that we're hoping that Janet Gover will be able to come back to New York, and we'll coordinate it through NYAHMA, of course, another meeting, a follow-up meeting to the one that we had previously. That's if we can get travel funds and whatever else. But I mean, that's the plan, that she will be coming back to New York so that we can have another meeting.
Any other issues?
Oh,
Any other? Yeah.
I've got
Donald.
two questions. During the recovering from Sandy, we're waiting on insurance funds and FEMA funds. Is it possible to make a drawdown from replacement reserves so we can make repairs? And to that end, can we draw down below the $1,000 per unit threshold based on this emergency repair?
I think that we can. You can borrow from your replacement reserve, but you would have to refund it once you get your insurance proceeds.
Okay. And the other problem with insurance is we're getting quotes of an increase of 300%. How do we cover that to operations if we don't have the cash flow? And can we come in? I don't know how to do that.
I mean, you're not the first one that we've heard this from, that, the insurance premiums have gone up astronomically. We are in the process of discussing that with headquarters. I don't know at this point in time how that's going to be addressed. I mean, I heard some instances where it's like 10 times more than what it used to be, and it covers even less of what, you currently have insured. So we're working on it with headquarters. I don't know if it can be addressed, but we're discussing it at least.
Any other issues? You've heard now from the HUD folks. As you know, if you deal in HUD programs, that HUD has contracted out most of its contract administration functions, which they used to do internally by your project managers. HCR, used to be DHCR, the state agency, is the contract administrator that was awarded the contract by HUD, although we never know what's going on if you read the PPCA contractors. And they supervise a private sector organization called CGI that actually does the day-to-day work. But it's good to hear from HCR. And there is a gentleman we have here who is an assistant commissioner, and he's really in charge of many of the programs that we deal with. Section 8 you talked about, the vouchers, and is in charge of the whole HCR program for contract administration. And it is Al Smith, and he is going to talk to you about what's going on. Al?
Thank you, Hunter. It's good to be here. You're used to hearing from Jackie Rabati from my staff, but she thought it more important to be on vacation in Portugal at this point. I'd love to be trading places with her. In fact, I said to her I wish she was going to write a script and I would just lip sync it today, but it didn't quite work out that way. I'd also like to recognize Gladys Franco from our New York City staff, who's in the back row. I think Marty Pressman is going to, from my staff, is also going to be here shortly. What I'd like to first talk about is the last couple of year wild ride that we've been on in the reprocurement that HUD was required to do for its project-based contract administrators. In February of 2011, they issued an invitation for application for entities to rebid on the ongoing administration of the PBCA portfolio. There were initial selections made, but because of issues in the process, all those awards were rescinded, and the process essentially started over again, except for in 11 states in the country, New York not being one of them. And then in February of last year, a notice of funding availability was issued by HUD, a different process, completely different process. And a number of entities had strongly asserted that that process was not only not correct, that it was not legal, but again, HUD continued through the process and was preparing to make awards when then actual lawsuits were filed in the Federal Court of Claims against that process. And so in the ensuing period, it's just been, we've tried to keep things as seamless as possible in our ongoing administration. But it's been a real difficult 2 years of uncertainty, not knowing if we were going to be administering this on an ongoing basis, whether it was going to be turned over to someone else to do, and what that might mean for the owner-agent community that we've taken now almost 13 years to build relationships with. And from my vantage point, although I'm a little more removed than Jackie and Gladys and Marty, everyone is, it's continued to get better every year that we've worked together. Mainly as a result of the big cooperation we enjoy from our HUD partners and from our owner agents community that we've worked with for this extended period of time. In that same period of time, while this procurement continues to be resolved, in fact, the timing of this conference this year is really interesting. Just earlier this week, the judge ruled that the NOFA that the plaintiffs were asserting was illegal, an illegal process, not just an incorrect one. He ruled against that and determined that HUD could, through that NOFA process, make the awards. But, of course, as we reasonably expected, there was initially there was a request for a stay of that decision. The judge denied that. Now we have every reason to believe that the next action may be an additional lawsuit in the Court of Appeals in the Federal District. So this thing has continued to take its ups, its downs, ups and downs. So we really don't know exactly where it will be going in that respect. Neither does HUD. In fairness to them, all they've been able to do in this period of uncertainty is continue to issue 3 months at a time extensions of the ACC, the annual contributions contract that we have with them. It's very difficult planning your life 3 months at a time, and especially as it deals with all of what we're required to do together with you. But we found our way through it, and the one exception has been that the management and occupancy reviews, the MORs, they were taken off the table. And I don't mind saying much to my chagrin. It took a long time to get that whole process back in the queue when we started in December of 2000. And there were a number of bumps in the road in retooling that process. But once it was stabilized, I think it's added value for everybody involved, especially when it comes to what we know is also your desire to maintain compliance with the regulations that you're subjected to. But the MORs, again, they're off the table. We have reason to believe that they will come back online. Exactly in what form, we're not sure. But the concern is, just like when we took over in December of 2000, that they hadn't been done in many cases for years. And will that institutional memory and that experience be lost at the owner-agent level? We don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see that happen at all. So as a result, I know Jim Van Loan from CGI is also here, and he'll talk more about this. What we've tried to do in this ensuing period is provide technical assistance on a number of matters that will keep the whole process alive and keep that understanding out there in terms of the major things that you want and need to do to be in compliance with all of the provisions of your contracts that you have that enable you to receive the Section 8 funding. That technical assistance has seemingly, at least again my once removed vantage point, it's been well received by you. We appreciate it. You know, we're trying to work together, not against you. And we've gotten good feedback that TA that we've provided with, again, big thank you to CGI for their role in that. Has been very helpful to you. I think how that's been best reflected is in the customer service surveys that we issue every year. This was the most robust response that we've had. Nearly 50% of the DBCA portfolio responded to the surveys that we did, with about an 84% positive rating. Customer service just isn't a slogan. You know, we really try and make it a practice of what we're doing. We have a job to do, but how we do it is very important to me. And I know it's very important to the hierarchy of this agency in general. So we will continue to provide that TA until we get a better reading on where things will be going with the DBCA awards. Consistent with the judge's ruling to date, HUD has just issued 2 3-month extension, which will take us through the end of the year. Now, I don't know whether that's a signal that they would possibly, at the beginning of October, if there's any change in dancing partners any place across the country with the PBCAs that run this, they have to provide a 3-month transition. So one of the thoughts is that by extending it through the end of September, that they may actually consider, again, subject to any other lawsuits that may come down the pipe, using October 1st as the transition period with new awards to be made January 2014. If that's the case, we certainly hope that that award will continue to be made to us. We'd like to think that we know what we're doing, that we've learned a lot over the last 13 years, and that we will be able to continue working with you in the future. It's been quite an experience in this BBC initiative. We have nearly 100,000 units that we work together with you on, and about 1,000 properties across the state. And I think we've all grown very well together, again, from all sides, from our HUD partners to working with you. And I just want to thank you all for the close cooperation, for the feedback that we've received. And I'd be glad to take any questions that you may have. Yes?
We have a couple of projects that are not processed through a contract administrator, but rather directed by HUD. Do you know if there's any plans to change that?
I can only speak for part of it. I think it depends on the nature of the project. There have been some that have been left off the table. I would probably be looking at a crystal ball to try and give you an exact idea. I don't know how much of that's also a function of congressional funding, but Teresa?
You know, basically it is a function of congressional funding, but also in reference to what was in the previous ACCs. You know, PRACs were not included, and I don't know if that's, you know, where...
Was it PRAC?
It was, okay. I don't know if the new ACC is going to include pracs, but, you know, again, you know, the paramount thing is funding. The more contracts you add, the more you have to pay. So that, you know, that is something that, you know, is up to Congress, whether or not they can appropriate the funds for, you know, additional contracts to be added.
The only other thing I wanted to say, and it's really not the target audience, but I'm also responsible for strategic administration of the voucher program, as Hunter had mentioned. We took a $20 million haircut, as you can tell. I looked like Marty Feldman before this past week. That program was greatly impacted. We are going to be leaving every month about 4,000 of the 44,000 vouchers allocated to us on the table because we don't have the budget authority to administer. So that's been the real source of day-to-day angst that we've had to deal with. Fortunately, as Teresa mentioned, PBCA has been a little bit more kindly dealt with, at least through the end of this year. Max, you have a question?
Yeah, Al, if we need TA assistance, who can we call to help us in the site?
Well, we have the website, pbca.ny, or pbcany.com, Jim? pbcany.com, or you could contact a member of our staff or CGI. We'll be glad to provide that.
We call CGI direct?
Jim? Could they contact CGI direct? TA? Yes, absolutely. Pretty strong answer. Anything else?
Voucher questions, anyone have state vouchers, HCR vouchers? As Al said, he wants that supervised that program as well.
I'm just the ivory tower administrator.
Do you now have weatherization under your domain, or is that still?
No, weatherization is in my general camp, but that's under Rich McKernan.
Anything else about HCR and the reorganization? Okay, well, thank you, Al. Always a pleasure to have you.